Hi, my name is Dr. Sarisi West Olatunji, and I am a faculty at Xavier University of Louisiana, located in New Orleans. I'm a past president of the American Counseling Association, and I'm also a past president of the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development. I've been asked by your instructor, Dr. Jeff Wolfgang, to talk with you a little bit about leadership in counseling. And hopefully, some of you are interested in leadership or already are emerging leaders in the profession. And so I encourage you to continue to develop your leadership, mentoring, and advocacy skills. I'd like to talk a little bit about three important emerging issues in leadership within our profession. The first is internationalization, the second is social justice and advocacy, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership development opportunities. So, when we think about internationalization in counseling, we understand that this is a natural developmental process for us. We're a relatively new mental health discipline, and I'm sure you know that by now because if you've been telling your family and friends that you're going into counseling, they're looking at you and trying to understand, scratching their heads, perhaps asking, is that like social work or are you going to be a psychologist? And you may not know how to respond to that, but we want you to be unapologetic in your identity as a counselor. We are something special, we're something different, and we think that we offer a way to work with clients that's effective, expedient, and definitely is much more conducive to who they are and much more respectful. So, as a discipline, we're relatively new and we're growing. So, we're still trying to determine where we fit and what are some of our applications and specializations and so on. And so, unification is something that you've probably heard a lot about. But this is sort of a conversation about unification, but globally. Now, over the years, we've had a lot of students, a lot of international students, to come into our programs, master's and doctoral level. And many of these students have gone back to their home countries and helped to develop counseling there. We are at a stage now where we have really a critical mass of former students and visiting scholars who've spent time with us who are back in their countries, and now they want to collaborate with us. They want to have conversation with us. And so what's happening is that we're expanding counseling on a global level. You need to be a part of that conversation. You need to add your voice to that. So I invite you to go to some of these international conferences, and whenever you see international students in your program and other programs, reach out to them. Be curious about why they're here and what it is that they have as a goal and what they plan to do when they get back to their home country. Another thing is that we believe in advocacy, and by connecting with our sister organizations in other countries, we get to advocate and to join hands and help them with their advocacy efforts in their country, help them to think about it, to allow them to articulate that they stand together with other organizations and so on. So that's important. As president and as a past president, I've had the opportunity to work with the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy, BACP, and they are our sister organization in Britain. I've worked with the Irish Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. They are our counterparts in Ireland, of course. And I've also worked with the International Association for Counseling, IAC. They have an annual conference. This past year was in Malta, little tiny little country off the coast of Italy. It's where, if you've seen the black and white movie, The Maltese Falcon, they're talking about Malta. And next year, in 2017, in the spring, they'll have their annual conference in Argentina. So you're certainly interested, you should be interested in one day joining them for their conference. Some of you may recall that the annual conference for ACA, American Counseling Association, was held in Montreal this past spring, and that was in partnership with the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association. So we are trying to begin these conversations I've also gone to India to collaborate with the Indian Counseling Association. I've traveled to Romania to collaborate with the Romanian Counseling Association. So we are trying to connect with our sister organizations. Um, we also want to support some of our graduates, just as we do in the States. We always tell you that even when you graduate, we're still connected, we're still a resource. Just because you graduate doesn't mean that you can't reach back and ask your former advisor or former professors questions that you might have about your career journey. We do that with our international students as well. And so we can provide support to our international students after they return to their home countries. The other reason why we want to get into internationalization as a profession is because we get to expand our understanding of multicultural counseling. Most of the work that we've done previously has been very internal. So we talked a lot about the multicultural issues within the United States, but as we continue to internationalize as a profession, we begin to add other voices about issues of marginalization in other contexts. As we know, a lot of our multicultural issues here center around race-based biases. Also, other biases, of course, like sexual orientation, religion, gender, ability, and so on. So, classism, of course. So, we do have those, but probably the biggest bear of that has been this issue around race. So that even when we begin to break down walls related to gender or ability and so on, that oftentimes those individuals who are part of the majority tend to have greater gains than those people who are of color. So it's important for us to look at issues of marginalization outside of our own U.S. context. And so by internationalizing, we are able to look at the problems differently. We understand them in a broader context. And so it's a value. We want to expand our understanding of multicultural counseling. Now, within the ACA, we have an international committee. It is a standing committee, and the chair of that committee is appointed, and also the members are appointed by usually the president-elect, who wants them to work on issues during their presidency. So the year before they become president, the ACA president will select committee chairs and chair members. But you can certainly talk to presidents-elect, send an email to them when you, if you're interested in any of the committees. The list of committees, the full set, can be found on the ACA website. But there is an international committee, and they do formulate activities at the ACA conference. So when you go to the ACA conference next spring in San Francisco, definitely look at the program and look for the international committee events. There's also an International Counseling Interest Network, and that's a group of people anyone can join. That's a group of people who are interested in international issues in counseling. So you can just join and be on their listserv and collaborate, share information, network, and so on. You should do that. ACA has been having conferences outside of the U.S. So they had a conference in Singapore, so that they are reaching out to ACA members in the Pacific Rim. And they are also working on a couple of other plans for conferences, collaborating with our sister organizations to reach out and to be able to provide resources. We also have a European branch of ACA. It's called EBACA, and they have an annual conference, and they also have a Mediterranean region. So they also reach out to ACA members who are living abroad in Europe, and they're a great group of people. You would really enjoy talking with them. So I suggest that you try to learn more about this, increase your competence. The second area that I mentioned is social justice, social action, and advocacy. And what we know is that by learning to take social action, you can enhance your clinical efficacy. You can also facilitate increased contact with your faculty members. who are engaged in perhaps social justice projects, initiatives, outreach, and so on. There are ways for your faculty to connect their course content to social justice issues. You need to ask them. If they're not already doing that, inquire, just raise a question, send an email to ask them, can they do that? And they can also demonstrate the value of social action within our work. We use social media to do these things. We certainly are trying to do more within our branch and regional initiatives. Divisions are sponsoring all kinds of projects. And also you'll find that there are town halls, courageous conversations around race or gender and so on. So look for those sessions to be able to talk about that. Within the idea of leadership, our profession is trying to do more to investigate this and what does leadership look like that's particular to counseling. So a lot has been written about leadership, just in general in business. There's been a lot in spirituality and so on. In nonprofits, there's been a lot of leadership research conducted, but there hasn't been a lot of research conducted in counseling that incorporates our core assumptions. And so it really is a challenge for us to do this. You'll see some work that's being done by CSI, Chi Sigma Iota, our International Honor Society, but there needs to be more. We need to do more. So I encourage you to think about writing papers in your classes about leadership. I invite you to think about presenting a poster at a conference about leadership. There's a leadership, a training institute that's held in the DC area by ACA. And so you might want to think about that. The Career Association, our career division, has a leadership academy. So think about a lot of ways to do that. There are a lot of emerging leader projects sponsored by ACES and by the regional ACES groups, the Association for Counselor Educators and Supervisors, ACES. So you want to think about developing your leadership skills. I think that leadership at its core for counseling has a moral imprint that incorporates our ideals of being developmentally a focus, of a wellness model, being strength-based, of respect, of incorporating various cultural aspects of who we are. Those things are very important to how we view leadership. My guiding principles for leadership always come down to three essential questions. One, who am I? And to ask that question in terms of my both professional and personal identities. Am I really who I am? Meaning, in my reflection about my actions, do they reflect who I say I am? So there's a mindfulness or a contemplative aspect of leadership in which we're reflective. And then there's the challenge that we put in the third question, am I all I ought to be? All of us as leaders and emerging leaders should always ask every day,